Alright guys, today we're going to be replacing the radiator on my 2001 Raptor 660. This can also be used as a guide for other ATVs, so let's get to it. First, go ahead and take off the radiator cover. For this case, it's just two 8mm bolts. Then, go ahead and take off the radiator cap. Now locate the coolant drain plug. On the Raptor, it's located on the water pump. For other four-wheelers, you may just have to take off the lower radiator hose. After the coolant is drained out, go ahead and put the drain plug back in. Next, go ahead and remove the seat. Then remove the 2mm bolts below the gas tank. Now, up under the plastic, you have two bolts on both sides. One of them is a 10mm and the other is an 8mm. Lastly, up front you have an 8mm that has a large washer. Now we can maneuver the plastic around the mounting brackets and pull the front plastics off. Starting with the radiator, I'm going to go ahead and take off the lower radiator hose, then move on to the upper radiator hose. Now go ahead and remove the connector that's on the bottom of the radiator. This one is actually a temperature sensor. For this connector, it's just a push clip. You push that down and then pull it out. Now we can take off the two radiator bolts. Now we can go ahead and remove the reservoir hose. Sometimes this practically gets heat shrunk onto it, so you may have to use a pair of pliers to get it off. I've went ahead and used the pair of pliers and broke mine loose, so just go ahead and remove it, just like so. Now we can pull the radiator forward and access the fan connector, which is this white one here. Now in order to take that off, it's also a push style. It's got a little tiny tab on it. You press down with your fingernail or a screwdriver and just separate, just like so. And lastly, for this, you have a breather for your fan, which you can go ahead and just disconnect off of the fan. It may also be stuck, just like the reservoir one. Just go ahead and pull that off, and you should be able to take the radiator up out of here. Alright, now with the radiator on the bench, I'm going to go ahead and take off the coolant sensor. For this one, it's a 24mm. This also has an O-ring on it, just make sure that O-ring is still intact. And now for the fan, I've actually lost the pieces that the bolts screw into, so I had to put nuts on the bottom of it. But in order to get to the nuts, I had to actually go out and buy a stubby that's a little thinner than your traditional 10mm. So just go ahead and remove the 3 bolts to get the fan out. And now lastly, go ahead and take out the grommets. Normally I just use a flathead screwdriver and I just push it on the inside and then I can pop it out the other side. Just like that. Alright, now with the new radiator, I'm going to go ahead and start with the coolant temp sensor. Just make sure that your O-ring is in good condition and replace it if you need it, and then go ahead and get it installed. And now to torque this down to 20 foot-pounds. And now to install the fan, I'm going to actually have to install these little clips that you can actually put screws into, since the setup that I had on the old radiator would not fit on this one because I can't fit the nuts underneath here. So for these, you pretty much just have to stick a flathead screwdriver in them to open them up, and then you slide them into these little slots. Just like so. And if you need them for reference, I ended up getting this kit at Harbor Freight. It seems to actually be the size that I need. That fits these, like the second to largest size. And also the screws, I'm actually going to have to use a bunch of washers with these because the fan holes are way too big to fit these screws into. Alright, now that I got the fan installed, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the grommets. Pretty much install these the same ways where you take them out. I just take a flathead screwdriver to them and pretty much just stick them in here. And once you get them rolled in there, you can kind of just spin them around. And just like that, that's how you get them in. And now it's ready to install on the four-wheeler. And now first to install it on the four-wheeler, you want to make sure that you put this peg inside the grommet down here on the bottom. Just like so. So before I start, what I'm going to do is go ahead and clean out these connectors. This one's not too bad because it keeps that little orange O-ring on the inside of it. But I'm still going to go ahead and take some of this electronics cleaner and clean out the inside, and then I'm also going to put some dielectric grease on it. So you can use dielectric grease or something like this bulb grease, which is practically the same thing. So to start off, for ease of access, I'm going to go ahead and put in the vent line for the cooling fan, which just hooks on the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and save the connector for after I put it on for how short this cable is. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is get the thermostat to radiator hose connected while I don't have it bolted in. Now you may have to actually loosen this up for your thermostat. My thermostat is not connected by a bolt, so I can just push mine on in. And I'm also going to go ahead and tighten this down while I can easily access it. And now I'm going to go ahead and bolt down the radiator with the 2 bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and just apply just a little bit of Loctite to these bolts. And now to torque these down to 5.1 foot-pounds. And now to go ahead and connect the reservoir line to the radiator. Just like so. And now for the lower radiator hose. I'm going to go ahead and get that tightened up as well. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and put these connectors together. I've already got the dielectric grease on them and I've got them cleaned out. So I'm going to go ahead and put the fan in first, which is just these 2 white connectors. Make sure they click together just like that. And then I'm also going to go ahead and get the temperature sensor, which is right here on the bottom. Just make sure the dielectric grease is on it. I'm going to go ahead and connect that up. And that one should click as well. Just make sure it's all the way in there. So now I can go ahead and add in the coolant. I'm going to go ahead and take the radiator cap off. Now before you pour in the coolant, just make sure that you, 1, put in the water pump drain bolt and make sure that your radiator lines are actually screwed in so you don't leak out any of the coolant you're just putting in. So now that I have it topped off, I'm going to go ahead and actually start the 4-wheeler without the cap on so I can let all the air bubbles come out of it. Normally what you do is let it boil up, but I don't know with this coolant how it's going to react. So I'm going to let it run, see if the fan runs or see if it boils up, but typically I let it run for maybe 8 minutes or so, and if no other bubbles are coming out, I consider it good. I know you can't see that all that well, but it is smoking a little bit, so it's getting ready to boil. I'm not seeing any more air bubbles come out of it, so this should be good. So I'm going to go ahead and put the radiator cap back on. So now I'm going to go ahead and top off the reservoir. I kind of got a long funnel all the way up here that I have to have Kelly help me with. So now I'm going to fill it up to where it reaches in between the low and the full line. Most of the time it's best if you put a light underneath it so you can actually see it on the inside of it. And right there should be good. And now I'm going to go ahead and put on the front plastic. Just make sure that you spread these pretty wide so you don't hit your radiator when you're trying to put it in. Now I can go ahead and just grab the plastic and make sure that this sits on the inside just like that. I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on all of these bolts for the plastics. And I'm going to start with these 2 right here underneath the gas tank. And then I'll get the one up front with a little bit of Loctite on it. And now up underneath the plastic, I'm going to start with the 8mm. I've got 2 washers on here, and then I'm also going to stick a washer with a nut on the back side. And then for the 10mm, I've already got Loctite on it. I'm going to go ahead and put a washer on it, and then the nut. And now lastly, I can go ahead and put on the radiator cover. And I'm also going to use a little bit of Loctite on these bolts as well. And lastly, we can go ahead and put the seat on. And well, that wraps up this video. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please ask them below. And if you'd like more videos like this, please subscribe.